after the Indian Ministry of External Affairs had issued a strongly worded statement defending the new farm laws introduced by the Modi government and described these as a reformist legislation aimed at helping the agriculture sector, and had blasted the vested interest groups abroad for fanning violence in India and unrest through the farmers' protest. The British Parliament went ahead and discussed a petition on India's farm laws, farmers' agitation, human rights and freedom of press. Taking strong exception to Britain meddling in the internal affairs of India on the pretext of defending human rights and peaceful protest, India's Foreign Secretary even summoned the British High Commissioner in Delhi and conveyed strong opposition to the unwarranted and tendentious discussion on India's agricultural reforms in the British Parliament. The petition that was taken up for discussion in the British Parliament urged the Indian government to ensure safety of protesters and press freedom. It asserted that the government must make a public statement on the farmers' protests and press freedom.
For the Indian government then, when they seek for a peaceful change to the legislation that India has taken and the abuses that they have delivered to these people, initial lathi charges, which was charges by the police with batons of wood and hitting elderly people in the process, women in the process, not seeing who was there. By and large, predominantly all of the farmers themselves have been peaceful. There have been other individuals from outside the movement who've tried to instigate violence. That has been condemned by the Farmers Union. This is about their livelihood. This is not to be treated in a way that disregards all of their issues that they wish to raise within Parliament. This dispute could have been finished quite easily, not 100 days that it's gone on for now. Government has to listen. The government chose not to listen. The government should be working with these poor farmers. They have chosen not to do so.
The freedom to protest wherever you are and the ability to provide food and welfare for your family is clearly an international human right. This issue has so galvanised the Indian diaspora community, especially those of Punjabi or Sikh background and others who have land links or familial links to farming in India, that tens of thousands have engaged in global protests, including hundreds and hundreds in streets and towns and cities across the UK.
However, the UK government believes firmly that freedom of speech, internet freedom, which has been raised by Wolverhampton, the Honourable Member for Wolverhampton South East and many others, alongside the right to peaceful protest, are vital to any democracy. We encourage all states to ensure that domestic laws and the way in which they are enforced must comply with international human rights standards. And in that spirit, we look to the Government of India to uphold the freedoms and rights guaranteed to its people by its constitution and by the international instruments to which India is party. About press freedom in India. And again, let me be clear that this government believes that an independent media is essential to any robust democracy. That's why we are committed to championing media freedom around the world, as is evident from our ambitious media freedom campaign that we launched in November 2018. India has a vibrant media scene which promotes lively debate across the political spectrum, and the UK government has worked to support this democratic tradition. For example, in 2019 we awarded scholarships on our flagship Chevening programme to 7 talented and aspiring young Indian journalists. And last year supported the Thomson Reuters Foundation to run workshops for Indian journalists to help them report on human rights issues. Now, my colleague, Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, is the Minister responsible for both human rights and for our relations with India. He regularly discusses media freedom, including the Media Freedom Coalition, of which the UK is a founding member, with India's Minister of State for External Affairs. And members, honourable and right honourable members, will recognise that this is a time of great ambition for the UK's relationship with India. Both governments are working to advance shared priorities across trade and investment, health, sustainability and climate change, and defence and security. We're also working with India as a force for good on the UN Security Council, and as this cooperation will help us fix global problems, and it will strengthen prosperity and well-being in India and the UK. However, whilst this is an exciting time for the UK-India partnership, it does not hinder us from raising difficult issues.
Besides the Indian Foreign Secretary's stiff message to the British envoy in Delhi, even the Harrow East member of British Parliament, Bob Blackman, has come down heavily and questioned the locus standi of British MPs to discuss Indian farm laws and the farmers' protest in British Parliament.
Namaskar, this is Bob Blackman, MP for Harrow East. India is the largest democracy in the world and the United Kingdom the oldest. Together we reach out together as friends in mutual cooperation and respect. The farming laws being implemented in India are very much a matter for the Indian government and for the state governments to implement and determine. They're not for the United Kingdom to make comment on or indeed try and instruct the people of India as to what they should do. Despite this, we've had a debate this afternoon in Parliament where many MPs have spoken in complete ignorance of what actually is going on. The new farming laws have been the process of 20 years of negotiation covering many different Indian governments. It's quite clear that the new farming laws will benefit particularly small farmers and those on low incomes, with the aim of the Indian government to double the income of these small farmers over the next 3 years. Now, clearly there are concerns because the middlemen who seek to control the market don't want to see any change. They're the ones that clearly have something to lose by this and clearly will want to prevent progress on these farming laws. However, this is a matter, as I said, for India to resolve itself. And during the demonstrations that have taken place, predominantly from 3 states, there have been obviously considerable numbers of people involved. They have been stirred up, they have been encouraged to demonstrate and continue to demonstrate over last 100 days. Some of those protests, very sadly, have turned violent. We have to treat with caution videos that are shown and other aspects. The reality is that the police force in India operates in exactly the same way as police forces around the world, namely by consent. Because India is such a democracy, led by a secular constitution with the opportunity to elect both state and national governments, it is not some form of police or military state. And quite clearly, the police are aiming to ensure that demonstrations can take place in an orderly fashion, but when those demonstrations turn nasty and violent, clearly the police have to take action, as they do in any state around the world. Now, the Indian government have engaged in various different negotiations with the demonstrators to try and ensure that any concerns are resolved. That is clearly something that is obvious would need to happen. There are also allegations about communication links being severed and prevented from taking place. I think the scenes that we saw on Republic Day, where deliberately violent acts were constructed with attacks on the police and indeed other institutions, demonstrate that the protesters did not have necessarily the interests of the farmers at heart, but more to formulate dissension and violent protest. And that is clearly unacceptable in any democracy. The issue around communications being cut, clearly, as I understand it, many masts were demolished by protesters. If you remove the masts, don't expect there to be mobile coverage, for example. So the reality is that we should be very cautious before making such allegations and indeed making sure that they are properly investigated. But my final point is that the protests need to be considered in the light of the advantage that farmers will gain from these various different aspects of the new farming laws, that we need to ensure that we actually converse with one another. And it does seem to me there's a deliberate attempt to stir up hostility between the United Kingdom and India in a completely unnecessary fashion. India and the United Kingdom are moving together on cooperation with defence, with security, on trade and other aspects of our working relationship. That needs to be encouraged and not destroyed in the way that certain people seem to wish. Certainly the decisions on Jammu and Kashmir, for example, on Article 370 and the other amendments to the Constitution are warmly welcomed by the vast majority of people in Jammu and Kashmir, because what they enable the princely state to do is to benefit from the economic revival in India and from the improved security and prevent the position of state-sponsored terrorism from Pakistan. Clearly we need to encourage and promote the secular constitution in Jammu and Kashmir that applies to the whole of India and not have that as special circumstances that I'm afraid have discriminated against religious minorities. So I hope that people will see sense, see the guidance and ensure that our friendship between the United Kingdom and India is formulated on a proper basis and a proper footing. I look forward to the visit of Boris Johnson, the United Kingdom Prime Minister, to India to meet Sri Narendra Modi and to announce the various different arrangements that we're making to encourage and promote